What's up guys, my name is Liam, and upon request today I'm going to be doing an in-depth guide of the Lamzu Atlantis versus the Lamzu Atlantis Mini. How do these shapes stack up and which one's going to be the best option for you? Let's find out. Alright guys, and here we have the Lamzu Atlantis OG on the right side here, and with the grips I got the Lamzu Atlantis Mini right here on the left. And for those of you that watch my channel and know, these are two of my absolute top favorite mice right now on the market, and a lot of people have been coming up to me and saying, should I get the OG size or should I get the Mini? So let's go ahead and break it down. First off, we're going to jump into the quality of these mice and why these mice are some of my favorite. When it comes to the clicks of the mouse, let's do a quick sound test. All right, now the Atlantis Mini. So as you guys can see there, the feeling of these mice are absolutely some of the reason why these are my favorite go-to shapes. In my opinion, for how I grip the mouse, these are some of my most comfortable mice. I love the buttons. I love how clicky they are. I like how light they are. I like how spammable they are. They just overall feel great. So when it comes to the overall build quality of these mice, just absolutely phenomenal. I do get a little bit of play left to right here on the Atlantis OG, but nothing too bad or hindering or anything like that. The clicks have worked great. The clicks do get slightly heavier towards the rear, but honestly, this is one of the best mice out there as far as consistency on the clicks throughout the buttons. If you're to compare it to something like the Endgame Gear, the XM2we, these clicks are just much heavier. They're much tankier. And when you get to the back, it gets much, much heavier on this mouse. So overall, very consistent clicks throughout. The side buttons do have a slight bit of pre-travel on them, but overall barely any post-travel, and I never have any problems with these buttons. Honestly, the shape, the distance, the feel, everything about this mouse is just top-notch, highest quality in my opinion, and for how I use the mouse. And with all my experiences with this mouse, with both of these mice, honestly, I couldn't praise these mice enough. They feel phenomenal to me. Everything about these mice feels nearly perfect, from anything from gaming to editing videos to browsing on the internet, stuff like that. So you really can't go wrong. All right, guys, so the weight of the Atlantis OG with the sapphire skates on looks like I got it coming in at 58 grams on my scale. And then the weight of the Lamzu Atlantis Mini with the side grips on looks like I got it coming in at 53 grams on my scale. One thing I've noticed about these mice is, I'll show you really quick how I grip the mouse. So how I grip the mouse is I generally do just a relaxed claw like this. So when I'm holding the mouse, I use the rear for pinky relief, and my ring finger usually stays around the middle area of the mouse. So if you're going to be doing any type of fingertip grip with this mouse, yeah, you can easily do fingertip with it. Works great for fingertip with the OG and with the Mini. Not an issue at all. From what I've seen online, the only people that really aren't too happy with this type of shape is if you grip more towards the front of the mouse. So if you're going to be doing like a relaxed or an aggressive claw and you grip the very front of the mouse, or if you're doing some type of a pincer claw grip to where you're going to be more forward on the front of the mouse does curve quite a bit on the sides, and people have pointed out that it curves a little bit more on the Atlantis Mini. And not only does it curve on the bottom here like that a lot, it also has this flare where it goes more narrow in the bottom and then comes wider at the top. So just something to keep in mind there based on how you grip this mouse. Again, I have heard people say that once you do hold on to the front of the mouse there, for them it usually doesn't feel as comfortable, whereas something that curves a little less like the XM2we, it seems a little easier for people to get up there if they're doing some type of a forward pincer claw grip, or if they're just gripping somewhere in front of the mouse. It doesn't flare out as aggressively from bottom to top, or is the side profiling curve as much either. So Just one thing to keep a note, but again, you know, if you grip the mouse how I grip it, finger tipping from the back or relaxed claw from the back or anything like that, this is definitely probably my most comfortable and favorite shape that's out on the market right now. So when it comes to the overall shape and size of these mice, we'll go ahead and throw up the Atlantis OG first. So the Atlantis OG is very close to the XM2we. And another example I can give you guys, if you're not familiar with either one of these mice, another really popular mouse out there on the market, this is the Razer Viper V2 Pro. So if you have any experience with the Razer Viper 8K, the V2 Pro, the Razer Viper Ultimate, any of these types of mice, overall, I would say the size of this mouse is a pretty similar and safe comparison to the Atlantis OG. Overall on hands, the front of the mouse feels very similar as far as width. And the way that the mouse curves, the curves are definitely more aggressive on the Atlantis here. The only part where I'd say where the Atlantis absolutely sticks out is if you can look at the top of the mouse here, it's a lot wider in the middle part of the mouse and even on the rear of the Atlantis as opposed to the Razer Viper. So a lot wider of a top of the mouse there. And then also obviously this has the rear hump. So this is going to stick out more in the rear right there, where this just has just a very smooth and gradual hump to the rear of the mouse. So this one just kind of feels like it falls in your hand, like your hand just kind of plops on it and lays flat on it. Whereas this one definitely does give you some more support with the hump. So if you're looking for some more support, like doing a claw grip or anything like that, and you want to make some contact underneath your knuckles here, this could definitely benefit you in regards to that class. And then overall, when it comes to the Endgame Gear XM2we, as I had mentioned to you guys, the front of this mouse, it curves more aggressively. So from bottom to top, it curves out more aggressively. And the bottom profiling on the mice it curves a bit more as well. And you can definitely feel it. Overall, the Atlantis does feel like a slightly longer mouse. And where it makes another big difference here is if you can see the top profiling of the mouse, the Atlantis definitely feels like a much wider and more bulbous mouse at the top middle point. The curvature from the top profiling of the hump or the top of the middle of the mouse go less aggressively out towards the sides. Whereas here on the Endgame Gear, you can see it curves a bit more aggressively and it doesn't feel as wide when it's sitting at the top of your hand there. Another thing that I do prefer about the Lamzu Atlantis over the XM2we is the XM2we has a little bit more aggressive of a rear hump. It kind of sticks out more in the back right here, and it feels a little pointier. Whereas the rear hump on the Lamzu Atlantis, it doesn't stick out as far in the back, and it just kind of has a smoother overall curve. Another difference between these two that people bring up often is the coating. People always hail the XM2we or just Endgame Gear's mice in general as having a very grippy, smooth coating on it. And I do want to say that, you know, the Lamzu is just a straight plastic. Personally, I don't really have issues with gripping the mice hardly ever, but you definitely do know that the XM2we is a lot more of a grippier mouse. The one downside of this, if you guys care about aesthetics at all, is that this mouse just always looks disgusting and dirty. But aside from that, you know, you do get a little bit better grip on it. Again, I don't usually have sweaty hands or clammy hands, so not an issue I necessarily come across. That is one thing that people always are bringing up about this mouse. But overall, my experience between these two mice, I love both these mice. I think they're great. Honestly, you guys can go either way on them. You know, just honestly, when it comes to the Lamzu, I just prefer the clicks more. Like I said, they're a lot lighter, a lot more spammier, where these ones feel a lot heavier. They feel really tight. This has a much smaller scroll wheel. It definitely has more defined steps and a bit heavier of a center scroll wheel click, where this one, it does have defined steps, but they feel lighter. And honestly, I feel like the mid button definitely feels slightly lighter on the Lamzu. And then when it comes to the side buttons, honestly, the side buttons both feel great on these mice. You know, I would say I haven't used the XM2 as nearly as much as I've used the Lamzu. The original Atlantis, this is the first copy I got, and I've used this thing insanely. Mine has developed just a slight bit of pre-travel over time to where the XM2s don't have as much pre-travel, but overall, I would definitely say that these mice have my favorite side buttons that are on the market right now. They feel great. And then when it comes to the feet of the XM2we, I do feel like the plastic on this is a bit rougher. So when you're sliding across the pad, it's a bit scratchier. And I probably wouldn't have noticed it so much if the feet weren't so big. And I actually do like the bigger feet design, to be completely honest with you. But as you can see, I still have the stock skates here on the Atlantis Mini. These skates feel, you know, a little bit more premium, a little bit softer than the skates here on the XM2we. And that's really about all when it comes to comparison between these two mice. I mean, the Lamzu Atlantis is a little bit lighter. Personally, I do notice a little bit of a weight difference there, especially when I'm making quick swipes or quick flicks. You definitely do notice that there is a difference there. But overall, I wouldn't say that it's something that, you know, you couldn't get used to over time or adjust to or anything like that. That's the major differences between these two mice. And though I slightly lean towards the Lamzu Atlantis over the XM2we just because the click feel, a little bit of the bigger scroll wheel, a little bit of the lighter weight. You know, honestly, you guys can go either way with this. It's just really, is the coating going to be more important to you? Do you prefer more of having the flatter sides on the mouse? It really just ultimately comes down to you and how you grip the mouse. Okay, and when it comes to the Atlantis Mini, some shapes that I like to throw out there that you can compare it to. So obviously one of the most popular shapes that a lot of people are going to know is the Razer Viper Mini. People always bring this shape up. Super cheap, used to be very readily available, so a lot of people are familiar with this. So when it comes to the Razer Viper Mini, I kind of feel like the Atlantis Mini is kind of a hybrid. And I'll show you really quick. I do feel like the Atlantis Mini, when it comes to the front of the mouse, the front and middle of the mouse are very similar to the Razer Viper Mini. So overall, you can see that they're about as wide as one another. They both have aggressive flaring from the middle out to the front. The Viper Mini also has that curve where it goes more narrow from the bottom and gets wider at the top, but it doesn't do it as aggressively. The Atlantis Mini definitely does it much more aggressively. But where it starts to stand out and make a difference is when you get towards the rear of the mouse. As you can see there, the rear of the mouse is much wider on the Atlantis Mini. And not only is the rear of the mouse, if you take a look at the middle here, the middle has that very slow curving from the top middle of the mouse out to the sides, to whereas the Razer Viper Mini has a very aggressive curve. So overall, the top of this mouse on the Lamzu Atlantis Mini and the rear of this mouse feel like a much larger and a much bigger mouse than the Razer Viper Mini. When it comes to the bottom profiling, if you hold the mouse mostly in the middle, towards the front, anything like that, yeah, they do feel very similar. But where it makes a difference, that hump in the rear definitely sticks out and is more defined than the overall feeling of the top of the mouse with the Razer Viper Mini. And I actually compared these two in my Pulsar X2 video where I was comparing the X2 to the X2 Mini. However, what I like to point out here really quick is when it comes to the size of the Atlantis Mini, honestly, the front part of the Atlantis Mini, the overall size and feeling is pretty similar in size when it comes to the Viper Mini. And then when it comes to the rear of the mouse, it's pretty close to the rear of the mouse of the X2 Medium. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. So overall, when you look at the bottom profiling of the mice, you can see that the X2 is much wider on the bottom towards the middle, whereas the bottom middle of this mouse feels close to the Razer Viper Mini to the front. However, the difference lies in the rear of the mouse. If you look at the back of these mice here, they're about equally as wide as one another. And in fact, if you look at the X2, how it's got more aggressive tapering from the top middle of the mouse to the sides. Yeah, the rear hump is lower on the Atlantis Mini, but it has a much smoother and gradual, a slower slope from the middle of the mouse to the sides. So overall, when it comes to these two mice, and if you were to grip these mice how I grip them, from the middle to the rear of the mouse like this, the first thing you notice is much more curvature towards the rear of the Atlantis Mini. But when it comes to the overall width of the mouse, if you hold these mice from the back, they honestly feel about as wide as one another. In fact, if you incorporate the top of the mouse, how wide it is here at the top of the mouse, honestly, the Atlantis Mini definitely feels a bit wider at the top of the mouse towards the rear. So as you guys can clearly see here, the Atlantis Mini is just a slightly scaled down version of the Atlantis OG. So a couple things I want to point out about the Atlantis Mini. Lamzu did leave the side buttons the same size on the Atlantis Mini as they did on the OG, and I think that's great. I love bigger side buttons. If you were to look at the bottom of these mice here, people have pointed out that the Atlantis Mini, since it is so much smaller, it does kind of feel like the curves are a lot more noticeable and a lot more aggressive on the side. Personally, I love it. I love how it gets more narrow at the bottom and it gets wider at the top. It makes this mouse extremely grippy. It's easy to pick up and move around with how I grip the mouse, and it just makes it an absolute joy to play with. So when it comes to both of these mice, I definitely feel like you can get away with fingertipping the OG Atlantis, but I definitely feel like it's much easier to fingertip with the Atlantis Mini. I feel as comfortable and as great that this mouse is practically made for relaxed claw grip. I feel like the advantage that the Mini has with its smaller size is that it just gives you a little bit more wiggle room as you're making those little micro adjustments in gameplay. So here's a look here at the front of the mouse. And as you can tell, it's a little bit more narrow there. Still has the aggressive curves out to the side. And then when it comes to the rear of the mouse, so overall, just a toned down version of the Atlantis OG. And again, the fact that these mice have such a wide top middle part and, such a wide rear end on the mice, honestly, it kind of makes the Atlantis Mini a hybrid between, I would say, a smaller and a medium style mouse. All right, guys. So that's my final thoughts there on my two favorite mice, the Atlantis OG and the Atlantis Mini. I've never really liked larger type of mice. Personally, I've always preferred medium to smaller types of mice. But with that being said, even though the Atlantis OG is a wider mouse and a bigger mouse, I still greatly love this mouse. I love how I perform with it. I play great. And, perhaps that could just be the fact that, I mostly do a relaxed claw grip from the rear. And to be completely honest with you, that's pretty much what this mouse was exactly intended and made for. So it could be just that it fits me so perfectly. But overall, when it comes to the performance between the two, I love these two. I go back and forth between them. Honestly, when I get grinding and it comes to, me playing my absolute best and my max, I do kind of lean towards the Atlantis Mini. Overall, I just feel like the shape works a little bit better for me. I do like the curving on the side. I do like how aggressive the curves on this mouse, because you could pull it back. I would be interested to experiment with having a little bit flatter sides on this mouse. But aside from that, these mice are just absolute bangers. I can't praise them enough. When I first got the Atlantis OG, I wasn't even expecting anything great from it. I just ordered it because I was interested in it. And this mouse just absolutely just blew me away when I opened it and got out of the box. I was like, wow, I cannot believe how phenomenal this feels. I love how smooth the rear hump is. Yeah, I do feel like there are some things that are kind of aggressive about the shape, but to be completely honest with you, they just work for me and my grip style. So anyways, guys, I hope this has answered your questions and I hope this has helped you out. If there's any other questions you have for me, please let me know down in the comments below. I did leave links for all these mice down in the description below if you're looking to support the channel. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.